Hello and welcome. I'm Ari Lax, back from Pro Tour Eldritch Moon, which means that we get to play with some Eldritch Moon cards on Magic Online, in this case in Modern. And this week, I am excited to get to try out a deck that I have been hyping since mid-spoiler season, honestly, and that is Eldritch Evolution. And I think this card is just crazy in Modern. So for those who have not really looked into this card in Standard or Modern, basically what it does is 3 mana, you sacrifice a creature, you get to search your deck for a creature with cost uh, 2 more than what you sacrificed or less, and put it into play. So we've seen these kind of decks really just kind of these toolbox combo hate bear decks, and we'll kind of get to that more in a second. They've kind of done really well in Modern, basically probably almost the entire format. Not quite, but we've seen Birthing Pod get banned because it was so good at that. We've seen Collected Company kind of show up and do a lot of the same things in Abzan Company alongside Court of Calling. And Court of Calling just on its own has really made Jeff Hoagland's season on the Star City Tour just playing Kiki Chord. And this is kind of what I think the next step in Kiki Chord is, and that's Kiki Evolution. And it's still core in the deck. Card's still good. And Jeff Hoagland played this deck at the SCG Classic at the SCG Tour Stop in Baltimore a couple weeks ago. And then this last weekend, he played another list of this deck at the SCG Tour Stop in Syracuse, New York, where he barely missed day 2. I want to say he finished, like 60. The cut was 19 points, and he had 18 in like 67th place or something like that. So I think this deck has legs. I think it's a very powerful deck, and I kind of want to explore at least a preliminary build that's a little different from Jeff's, because if you listen to his deck tech, he kind of talks about it as a value deck, but I don't think that's really how Eldritch Evolution plays out. Eldritch Evolution, you sacrifice 2 cards worth of resources to get a payoff in the end. And the payoff is that you get to search for something that's, you're generating mana, you're generating, card selection. And I think that in Modern, what you're not going to grind them out by 2 for 1 yourself to start and then getting a 2 for 1 off of that. What you're going to do with this card is you're going to find something that just KOs your opponent, put it on the battlefield, and end the game. And I think that's the approach that I want to take to it. And I think that there's a few key differences if you look at lists that kind of, fall out of that. So you've got a lot of the same spells. I have the 6 tutor effect, and it's very reasonable that that gets cut, so we'll see how that goes. Some Path Exiles for removal. You can loop that with Eternal Witness. It's just generally powerful. Just helps you in the fair games. So, not going to argue with that. Both playing mana creatures, but Jeff is playing 5. I think that I kind of want 6, maybe 7. I think that turn 2 Eldritch Evolution is a big deal. And we'll get, there's another reason for that I don't think is necessarily in Jeff's list. But we'll get to that. On 2, we have a lot of the same things. Spellskite as a hate card against Bogles, Infect, Burn. Ooze against the Graveyard decks, though I think it might be a little too slow against Dredge. We'll see. Wall of Omens is a generic value thing to sacrifice. Voice Resurgence as a very solid value thing to sacrifice. And Selfless Spirit holds off some things, but it's very similar to Spellskite, and I like it for doing the same thing as Spellskite in a few different ways. And that is protecting Magus of the Moon. I think that the sequence of turn 1 mana creature into turn 2 Eldritch Evolution for Magus of the Moon is the thing that excites me most about this deck. Realistically, it's just the ability to shut your opponent out of the game on turn 2 in a deck that can also play long is just really absurd. And unlike the traditional Blood Moon problem, when you have 5 Blood Moons in this deck, but 4 of them, when you draw them late, are just great. They're Eldritch Evolutions. So you don't have this flooding out on mana hate or land hate issue that previous turn 2 Blood Moon decks usually had. So I think that's a really huge thing. And I have Spellskite and Selfless Spirit to protect that. Just more ways to make sure my Magus of the Moon can stay on the battlefield and make my opponent not cast any spells. Beyond that, we have Eternal Witness and Kitchen Finks. Jeff does not like Kitchen Finks, but I think it's really good right now. I think that one of the things you can do to KO with Eldritch Evolution is get card advantage, but I think a key part of that is sacrificing something that retains battlefield presence, and that's Kitchen Finks or Voice of Resurgence. moving up the curve. We have Restoration Angel, necessary for the Kiki kill, and also just a good creature with all of your enters the battlefield effects. Pia and Kiranalar. So if you sacrifice, it's just a good card again. But if you sacrifice Voice of Resurgence to find Pia and Kiranalar, you have an Elemental token, 2 Thopters, and a Pia and Kiran, which is 8 power on turn 3, which is not absurd, but for the level of effort and investment, it's pretty good to just have access to that line. And then a Glenelendra Archmage. So this is your KO, or virtual KO against a lot of things. But the important thing with this deck is that it's a little easier with Wall of Roots in the deck, which I have not found room for. But any Mana Accelerator plus a 2-drop, and they can be the same thing, lets you go. So let's just do the Wall of Roots simple example. You play your second land, you play a Wall of Roots. You untap, you play your third land. You activate Wall of Roots for mana, pay 2 mana and sacrifice it. Or pay 3 mana total and sacrifice it. You still have an untapped land, and then you just get an Archmage. And at turn 3, Archmage with counter mana up is just really backbreaking for a lot of decks. In this deck, you have to go mana dork into another creature and then do it. But previously in Kiki Pod, which I played a lot, you had this issue where you could often get Archmage onto the battlefield turn 3. All you needed was you play Birthing Pod on 2, and then you just play a 2-drop, and then you could chain up. But the problem is you never have mana to activate it, which is a really big issue. And just the combo decks in this format kill on 3. The spell-based ones are 3 to 4-ish at times. And if you're on the draw, you were usually just dead if you just put an Archmage onto the battlefield with no mana untapped. If you're on the play, you're sweating it. And now just putting in the battlefield on turn 3 should just, with mana up, should just be enough. Just always enough to stop whatever combo deck your opponent's playing, which is really huge for the game win percentage with this deck. We'll skip a bit and we'll talk about Rurik Thar. Plays a similar goal, or similar role. It's very reasonable that this card ends up getting cut, but I just like the power that it represents in terms of not just combo, but some combo decks where just Archmaging them might not be enough, countering twice against some living end hands, some of the grindier decks, and Rurik's just better against control in some spots. I want to try it, but it's possible that this is like the Elvish Norn where you just don't even want to think about getting that high up the curve because you don't have enough force to reliably sacrifice. You got a Kiki to combo off of Restoration Angel. It's also just a Find Fair card, a Revel Arc to rebuy whatever, Archmages, Witness, Voices. That's your value breaker in the main deck. In the lands, we've got one Gavany Township, a bunch of fetch duels, a Firelit Thicket to make it easier to cast Kiki Jiki, some Rage of... these aren't Sean. Rage of Verge Thicket, as your deck's curving up to 5 or 6 is kind of sketchy. And I don't necessarily like the interaction with Magus, so they might become basics. But I'd like to try the slightly better actual mana first to see. And then just enough basics to cast our spells through Magus of the Moon. I will note, no island. You've got an Archmage in the main deck. It's not worth worrying about. And there still is a mountain because you do need fetchable lands to cast Kiki Jiki, and that is a painless one, which is, again, kind of important when it's your 5th land. You might not have the life to spare to cast Kiki Jiki there. So, looking to the sideboard, we've got a bunch of tutor targets, but I'll go over the spells first. So, Engineered Explosives has gone a lot up in stock recently. It's really good against Death Shadow Zoo, really good against Bushwhacker Zoo, because those decks are just full of 1-drops. It takes out Grafdigger's Cage, it takes out all the random Lords and Merfolk when set to 2, or most of them. And yeah, just generally, it's gotten a lot better lately. And just for a number of odd, unrelated reasons. And we'll just kind of see me probably boarding in it a ton over the course of these matches. Path to Exile and Negate. So Path, shoring up, just another interactive spell in the matches where you want to go grindy and interactive. Infect is one of those where you just want to pick off all their stuff. Jund, you need to pick off their Tarmogoyf, their Dark Confidants to get through. Just, max out on that when you need it. And Negate's there just to kind of get combo if you can. It's not 100% necessary. It might be better off as a creature, so we'll see. And then a boatload of tutor targets. You're Juggernaut Tutor Target. That's just a Lightning Helix, show up the burn matchup, and take out early creatures against the Zoo decks. Tutor Target. So we've got Is it Staticaster. That's the closest one to the main deck. It kills Dark Confidant and Lingering Souls, but I don't think that Jund and Abzan are super prevalent. So you just end up in a lot of spots where you're like, yeah, it's great against Infect and Affinity and Elves, but those are decks you can sideboard for. You don't really care about. Against like the normal Magic decks, you're not picking anything off with this. So it's dead a reasonable amount of the time. Eidolon of Rhetoric shuts down a lot of the combo decks. Ad nauseum gets very hard for them to kill with through this storm. Not the world's worst thing against Infect because they have to kill you over multiple attack steps. Just reasonably good interaction to slow the game down and allow you to get into your 4 and 5 drops. Thragtusk to break the grindy matchups and also KO burn when you Eldritch Evolution for it. A Kataki for Affinity. All these cheap ones, the 3 or less ones are turn 2 things potentially off Eldritch Evolution. So again, Melira, you can land an early Melira against Infect and not take any Infect damage. Another Ooze, just another threat / graveyard hate. Not sure it's necessary. The Thrun the Last Troll, just a thing to slam against control off Evolution. It's actually basically like a full-on KO against Jeskai, so we'll see if it goes in anywhere else, but I think that it's a trap to board this card in against like Jund, so just almost exclusively against blue-red control. A Wreck Sage just to mop things up and also fine against Affinity. Then a Fulminator Mage against Tron and Scapeshift. I thought about an Avalanche Riders in that slot, but basically we've got Eternal Witness and Restoration Angel in even quantities for reuse. Like the real thing is like how often can you reuse it? And it's all things being, it's just completely equal here. All things being equal, I'd rather have the one that I can potentially Eldritch Evolution for on turn 2 in the spots where it might be better than Magus of the Moon. Though having access to both does mean that it might again not be 100% necessary. But I think over the course of the matches we'll see, and we'll start to be able to trim away the fat here and just have this really lean Tutor toolbox engine, which has kind of just been, it's just really what I want to be doing in Modern. Just playing cards that instantaneously beat my opponent, having a lot of flexibility beyond it, doing so in a lot of different ways. Just this deck has flexibility and power. What more could you ask for?